Hi everybody, welcome back to the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel. People who subscribe to the channel, watch the videos regularly will know that we like to bring you the rarest, the most exciting, the most incredible shotguns we can find, and today is no different at all. We've previously looked at some very rare Mirokus. You know, I make no bones about the fact I'm a huge Miroku fan, always have been, always will be. I think they're fantastic. And we've looked at some of the President ranges before. So we've looked at the G11, which I would argue is probably the most common of the President models. That sounds ridiculous because they only made 1,000 worldwide across all the grades. We've looked at the G13, which was the very first video we did. Super rare gun. Very, very scarce. Certainly a gun that I've never seen until I got my hands on that one to do the video. And today we've got the one that fits in the middle. We've got the G12. Now, we looked at the G11, which was scroll engraved. We looked at the G13, which was very deep game scene on a black action with gold embellishments. Really pretty. So this model sits exactly in the middle in terms of numbers. I've got no idea what that means. I would imagine at the time, I would surmise that the G12 was, you know, a bit more money than the G11 because it's game scene engraved, etc. However, I can't confirm or deny that. So this gun is based on a 3800 action. This was built in 1986. To give you an idea, again, a bit of history, a bit of information, is when Browning and Miroku amalgamated, which was the late 1970s, after 1980, Browning and Miroku started to use the letter prefixes on their serial numbers. So if you have a bit of a Google and you've got a Miroku that's got 2 letters at the end of the serial number, that will denote the year of manufacture, so it'll tell you how old your gun is if you don't know. Yes, you can date them prior to that, but it's a little bit harder to do. So this is 1986, which is what PT denotes on the back of the serial number. Now, to give you an idea how few of these guns came into the country, a couple of these I've seen previously. Both guns were less than 10 serial numbers apart from this. I remember the gun that was 2 serial numbers apart from this, which was 99915, and this is 99917. 1986, modelled on a 3800 action. You remember the ones we looked at before were a kind of a crossover between the 800 and the 3800 because they were late 1970s guns. This is not, this is later than that. Now, I spoke to a few people over the years about these guns, and they've always said to me, yeah, you know, they're made in the custom shop. There's a lot more handwork goes into them, you know, and someone actually said to me they slim them down in the middle. Now, earlier this week, I actually tried to put an additional set of barrels on this gun for a customer to see how they fitted. And I got a set of 3800 barrels, Miroku 300 barrels from a 19, I think it was 80 something gun, and thinking, oh yeah, they'll just drop on and we'll play around with the 4-end hook. Not a chance. This gun is so hand produced. I always say handmade because it isn't handmade, but there's a lot of handwork that goes into this gun. It's nothing like a standard 3800, and the barrels, as I discovered this week, are certainly not interchangeable. So we'll start off with the action. Those who are really into guns and into Brownings, into Mirokus, will recognise that this is not dissimilar to something like a Browning D4G in the style of the engraving. So if we go back to the Browning B2G video we did, then the G basically denotes in the title that it's very deep, bold, Germanic kind of engraving, very deep relief, and this is exactly what this is. So we have got a stunning game scene. I mean, it kind of looks oriental in the type of scroll and the trees that are used. You've got a hunting scene with a duck and a dog, and if you look at the muscle tone on the dog and the trees, it really is a really spectacular piece of engraving. Loads of border scroll work in the actual style of a scroll. When I say a scroll, I mean like a rolled piece of paper, which I think is a nice touch. Profusely engraved on the bottom. Again, you've got what looks like a spaniel with something in its mouth, a duck in its mouth on the bottom of the trigger guard, rolled trigger guard, which denotes top quality again. Completely engraved all the way down the trigger tang. Looking at these screws, this gun's never been apart. Again, we try and bring you rare guns, but more importantly, we try and bring you guns that are in exceptional condition, because then you can get a real feel for the quality and the work that's gone into these guns. Trigger, again, hand checkered, gold plated trigger. You've got on the bottom there, BC Miroku President. Really nice little touch that. And everything is engraved. The whole thing is engraved. And I think if you look at the difference between this and the G11 and you put them side by side, you will see the difference in the level of engraving on each of these guns. On the other side, again, you've got another hunting scene. Again, the trees really nicely picked out. You've got some leaves and some floral work at the top here. And the all-important engraver signature at the bottom. It's some initials on this particular gun. And it's just got the wow factor. You know, you look at this gun and it's like the engraving is different colours. It's almost like it's been drawn as a night scene because of the relief and the different shading, etc. in the background. It's a serious piece of kit in terms of engraving. There's no question of that. So we talked about the engraving. Like I said, even though it's of a 3800 period, it ain't quite the same as a 3800, because if you look here, you will find that the action sides have been, I would imagine, hand filed, and they are slimmer. It's a slimmed down version of a 3800, which is why I couldn't get those barrels on, which was a real shock to me, to be fair. Just going over the top of the action, top lever's engraved. You've got leaves on the top of the top lever. The back strap's engraved. Even this little scroll around the top of the back of the action where it meets the back strap, safety catch is engraved. It's all engraved. It's a really beautiful looking thing. If you're a Miroku fan or a shotgun fan, you can't fail to be impressed when you look at that. As we've talked about with the other Miroku presidents before, this one has got polished internal. So it's got polished ejector slides. Again, you can see this gun has had very little use because of the level of polishing on the ejector slides. The forend iron itself is hand polished, and then of course you've got hammers, etc. inside the action which are hand polished. Now, to put things into perspective, and I've probably said this before, these guns were an awful lot of money, and at the same time you could probably buy a handmade Browning, a completely handmade Browning, something like a B2G, for the same, if not arguably in some cases a bit less money. Because what Miroku did with this President range, it was a way of showcasing what their engravers and what their action filers and what the people at the factory were able to produce. You know, they didn't just produce these bog standard 600 OREs with black action and really plain dual Monte Carlo stocks. This was like the pinnacle of what they were able to do, and I think a lot of it was down to pride, which is why there's so few of them, because yes, they would have cost a lot of money, but also you were only going to buy one if you were seriously into Mirokus, or if you wanted something different to a Browning. This particular gun is a sporting gun. Now the G12, to my knowledge, was only available in 30-inch strap, 28-inch sporter. I've never seen a game gun. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I've never seen one. Sadly, they never did a 30-inch sporter, but again, 1986. 28-inch barrels were the thing. If you look at a Beretta or a Browning or Winchesters from that period, the majority of them had shorter barrels, 27.5, 27 even with Nikos, and 28-inch. So it's not unusual to find a gun like this with shorter barrels to what we would consider the norm to be today. So we continue the level of quality and the attention to detail. Now, talking about the barrels, this has got chopper lump barrels. So this barrel was manufactured from one piece of metal rather than the method that's used today, which is largely sleeving the tubes into the lumps, which is classed as basically demi-block as opposed to monoblock. 10mm sporting rib with a tram line, with a centre bead, and also what you've got here, where the forend sits, you've got these little wooden cleats. Now, you'll get these if you buy a new grade 5 Miroku today, and it's just to make sure that everything fits in a bit nicer and it just feels smoother. And again, it's just a sign of quality, and it's just a really nice touch. I've got Miroku on the barrel stamp there, 18.4 barrels. Now this particular gun, fixed choke, is choked quarter 3/4, which is traditionally what Miroku and Brownings are choked. If you get a sporter or a game, that's what they'll be choked. You've got fixed choke Mirokus, trap guns are 3/4 and full. If you go back a bit further, so like 1970s, actually full. I remember I had an 800 one, which was full and extra full, which was ridiculously tight. Quarter 3/4 on the sporters, and then some of the game guns are actually 1/2 and 3/4. But traditionally, most of them, if you come across one for the last 30, 40, 50 years, and it's a sporting specification or a game specification, it will be choked quarter, improved cylinder, and 3/4, improved modified. So pick up the forend, and again, you've got this really nice deep relief engraving. You know, I use the term attention to detail, but it's just a very impressive piece of kit. This gun is, there's no question. Chrysanthemum, which again denotes is a kind of a Japanese symbol on the forend, and the checkering's quite interesting because even though we've got double point with this extra point on the stock, on the forend, it's it's a bit more whirly, because you've got the traditional double point at the top, the extra point here. Again, you would have extra points on a gun that's higher quality, and then it continues around the bottom. But also you've got, I don't quite know what the pattern is called, to be honest with you, but it's very, very different in the middle to what you would get on a standard Miroku if you went and bought one today. Moving on to the stock. French walnut, no question. Very, very straight grain. Again, it's a clay gun. You would argue that we don't want anything too fussy, too busy, too grainy, if you like. Whereas the straight grain is going to be nice and strong. It's going to be more suitable for the job of clay pigeon shooting, of sporting in this case, although you could argue with it being shorter barrels. You could use it for game, you could use it for skeet. It is a crossover gun, but ultimately it was manufactured as a sporter in sporting specification. Now the butt pad's quite interesting because I don't believe it's original. I think it's a modern butt pad with this little gold, is it gold or cream line, which might be the original spacer off the original stock. But the thing about these guns is when they were new, they were a considerable amount of money, and you tend to find that people who have been lucky enough to own one or still own one have either been too scared to shoot it because it's so special, or they've shot it to hell. There doesn't seem to be any kind of halfway house. You'd never come across a, you know, a high grade older Miroku that's, you know, in okay condition, because it just doesn't seem to happen. So with this one, obviously we're very fortunate because the thing just hasn't been used. Interestingly enough, although I've looked, I can't figure out what these guns cost new, because I'd like to make comparisons to, you know, Browning B25s, etc. So if anybody knows what these guns cost, anybody had one when they were new, please comment below, because I would be very, very interested to know, because I have my ideas, but it would be interesting to know if they are correct or not. So as with all the guns that we try and source here at Eastfield Gunroom, we try and get some kind of backstory, some kind of provenance. You know, I love guns that have got cardboard boxes with them and documentation. They're my favourite. You know, they've got everything with them. And this one is no different. What we've got here is we've got the inspection certificate from Miroku in Japan. Just says that it's a custom G12. Now, these guns are known as Miroku Customs as well as President, so don't get confused by that. I mean, this is interesting because it's actually got the word President on the bottom, which is handy. G12, that it's a 12 gauge, the barrel is 28 inch, the serial number and the choking, and it just shows that what it's been passed for, it's been signed off, etc., for quality control, and it's just a nice thing to have. You will still get one of these certificates should you buy a new Miroku today, but obviously the more owners a gun has and the older it becomes, things like this tend to get lost with house moves, etc. Alongside that, we have got the 3800 bog standard manual. Again, it's built on a 3800 action, although we couldn't get 3800 barrels on it, which absolutely gobsmacked me, but it is what it is. It just shows the testament, the fact of how much these guns are hand built and impressive as they are. One thing I haven't talked about is the weight, 7 pounds 11 ounces, and we haven't done the balance test, so let's just do that. Again, when you put it together, it just feels so good. So you'd assume it was factory balanced, and there you go, pretty much on the hinge pin. Superb. If you watch the previous Miroku President videos, did the G11 and the G13, we talked about, if you recall, the original mother of pearl Forsyth bead. Now, the two guns we've previously looked at were both, very strangely, rebarreled here in the UK prior to being sold, and because of that they didn't retain the original bead. However, this gun has got the original mother of pearl Forsyth bead, which makes it completely original in that respect. We've also interestingly got an oval rather than a shield, but again, there was different variations in these presents, in these customs, as to what had shields and what had ovals. And again, it just shows that it's been looked after, it's been cherished, because, you know, there are various things you can buy today that are different Forsyth beads. Someone might have stuck a red bead on the end and just chuck that in the bin, or a, you know, a high vis thing. And it's just, to find a gun that's been kept original and authentic is a real plus point. And I'm just really pleased to show it to you because it is a rare gun. So that kind of fills in the gap with the President stroke custom Miroku range. We've done the G11, we've done the G13. Obviously this is the G12. We've previously done the SP100, which was a much later gun. God, if I put all the cards up on the screen from all the videos, I'd be like Bruce Forsyth. And we've got a couple more to go, so do stay tuned if you like a Miroku President. We are still out there. We are still looking for these rare guns. That has been the Miroku President G12 from me, Matthew Morgan at Eastfield Gunroom in the fantastically glorious British countryside. Thanks for watching. Comment below anything you want to know, anything you review requests, etc. Get in touch, check out the website. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Keep sending those reviews in. I've already mentioned that, but I'll mention it again. Reviews, requests. See you soon. Cheers.